Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. I'm Jay, and today we're going to be continuing our look at 3rd edition with the Codex Dark Eldar. So here we go, we're getting into Codex Dark Eldar. Now, like I say, this is the first appearance of the Dark Eldar in Warhammer 40,000. As I stated in the last video when we did the Space Marines, there was like fan-made books and stuff like that before this in 2nd edition, but the Dark Eldar didn't really actually have an official rule set in the game until 3rd, and this is the introduction of the Dark Eldar. So this is the first time they came out with, GW came out with actual models for the Dark Eldar. Of course, like I say, they were sort of a rumor in the fluff, but now they actually gave them a form, and this is the first form they took. So this is a historical lesson as much as anything else, in the sense that this is where it all comes from, guys. So if you're a Drukhari player these days, this is where it all started, in the 3rd ed of Warhammer 40,000. Some awesome cover art, of course, as always with the 3rd ed books. We have a clear evolution of the artwork of Warhammer 40,000. Again, I'm a huge John Blanche fan, but as we get into these later editions, you see a lot less of that sort of weird cartoony grimdark and a little more of this more realistic, for lack of a better word, artistic interpretation of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And as we get further through the editions, you'll see that it gets a lot less comical and a lot more serious and a lot more dark. Yeah, that being what it is, whatever. Awesome cover art. Let's get into it. So as always, we're going to open up to the first page, the most important page. This is something that's pretty funny, actually. You can see the $20 sticker there. So like I say, these books are actually quite a bit thinner than the ones we saw in 2nd edition. As you can see, this one's very tiny. And so Games Workshop, I think, did that because people wanted just rules and not as much fluff. And so they were able to sell it for, you know, 20 bucks as opposed to the 2nd ed ones, I believe, at the time anyway, were anywhere from $40 to $60, which is a lot of money back in the 90s, compared to now, considering they're all hardcover and full color for 60 bucks. Yeah, things change, things evolve. So anyway, we've got some awesome pictures of the models there. There's the original Talos model, which is wicked cool, as well as the witches. The silly looking warp beasts. I always thought these models were ridiculous looking. I don't know why they ever put those out, because even at this time I found people were using Chaos Hounds, Flesh Hound models. They weren't using these silly looking dogs. And the plastic Dark Eldar Warriors, which we actually had all the way through till 6th edition when they finally redid the Dark Eldar line to be what it is today. These models looked really cool at the time. Everyone was like, wow, those are super cool. But then as other model ranges got updated, everyone shied away from the Dark Eldar, or at least a majority of people shied away from the Dark Eldar because of the just goofiness of their models. But again, much less goofy than 2nd ed, much more goofy than 4th or 5th ed. So this shows you how things have become a little more serious over time. Anyway, most important page, as always, the table of contents and the publishing information. So we can see here, this one was written by Jervis Johnson and Gavin Thorpe. So again, we're seeing a lot less of Rick Priestley and a little more of the other dudes. Again, we should always look at the copyright date. So this book was 1998, so it's right in line with the Space Marine book we did last week, as well as the rule book, all released in the same year. Again, probably because Space Marines and Dark Eldar were the starter set, so they wanted to get those books out right away, is my only understanding of why they would have released them first, because this is where they wanted you to start. So much like the Space Marine book, just a quick little explanation of how this book works, why you collect the Dark Eldar army, how to collect the Dark Eldar army. Some cool little fluff, as always, but again, they don't have massive sections of fluff in these books. They're really just like, this is it, this is the setting, here's the rules. And we'll see that as we progress here. Bam, right into the Dark Eldar army list. Now, the cool thing about 3rd ed is they gave you these cool little things throughout the books where it just kind of gave you little explanations. So this is, I guess, is showing you the Dark Eldar Reaver jet bike as opposed to the normal Eldar jet bike, and just the differences technology, stuff like that. Just some cool little things. So they did incorporate quite a bit of fluff into this, but only in small snippets like that. There wasn't huge stories like there was in the second ed books. Large sections of fluff. These books are really just like straight to the point rules. And that's kind of the way it's going to go throughout 3rd edition. So as we progress through this edition, you guys will see how, I guess, how things evolve and how they change their sort of way of doing things. So as usual, you got your standard Force Org chart there. Again, this is sort of the beginning of the Force Org chart. In this edition, like I said, there was slightly different Force Org charts based on what kind of mission you were playing, but for the most part, for pickup games, this is the chart that everybody used all the way up until 7th ed. Not even kidding there. Literally, 2 HQ, 2 troops base, up to 6 troops, 3 fast attack, 3 heavy support, and 3 elites. Bam. Alright, let's get into the actual army list. So we've got the Dark Eldar Armory to start. Once again, they didn't list all of the upgrades in the unit entries. Now they did list some, so you can see here with the retinue, they've given you, of course, the special weapon options and the heavy weapon options, adding in characters, adding a transport with the points listed there. But for the most part, when it came to characters and when it came to squad leaders and stuff like that, they always refer you back to the armory. Very similar to the way they did in 2nd ed. And we kind of still have that in 8th ed, but the armories are much smaller these days because most stuff is included in the data sheets these days. With this edition, there was still a little bit of back and forth, flipping back and forth throughout the books, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Like I say, streamlined, very condensed. And yeah, is what it is. So let's take a look at their HQ choices. We've got the Dark Eldar Lord, of course, which has 2 versions, the Archon and the Dracon. So that would be like your Mighty Hero and your Exalted Hero or whatever. Much like 2nd edition, they had levels. We've done the same thing here. And it's an independent character unless you've given him a retinue. It's listed here, which obviously counts as the same HQ choice as the Lord. And then you've got a Homunculus. Cool. So obviously this is very basic. This is where, like I say, it started. So you won't see as many unit selections as you see nowadays, because of course they add things in as time progresses. And like I say, in 6th ed, they really got a good redo. Yeah, so for elites, we've got Grotesques. Cool. Which it appears are just a little bit stronger than most Eldar. They're still toughness 3, which is interesting to note, because I believe Grotesques now are big, like, ogre-type dudes. Whereas here you can clearly see by this artwork that they're kind of just skinny little Eldars. But they are stupid, which is interesting. They have the stupidity rule, as well as feel no pain. Excellent. This is the start of the feel no pain. It shows here on a 6+. Okay, that's pretty cool. And they are terrifying, so there is still some psychology in this edition. Grotesques are horrible opponents to fight against. Any opponent beaten by them in close combat automatically falls back without a leadership test. Ooh, that's interesting. Alright, moving on, we got Mandrakes. Cool. The Splinter Pistol and a close combat weapon. Shadow Skinned. Special chameleon-like qualities of the Mandrakes allow them to blend into the background, even when standing in open terrain. Always count as being in cover, giving them a 5-up saving throw against most attacks. This counts as an assault as well. Wow. You don't usually get cover in assault, even in this edition. And the Mandrakes will always strike first. Yikes. If attacked by something that ignores cover, their normal armor save applies, which is 5+. Okay, fair enough. And hidden deployment. You have to decide which one of the squads is revealed. Until the squad location revealed, your opponent may not shoot, assault, or otherwise attack the Mandrakes in any way. It cannot be used to crossfire purposes, block line of sight, etc. Individual models may move up to 6 inches in the movement phase and can do nothing else. Okay, that's kind of cool. They're just hidden until they're revealed. It's kind of neat. Then we got Witches, which basically are just Dark Eldar that have combat drugs, more or less. Obviously they have a 6-up armor save instead of your normal 5. Actually, maybe we should check the warriors to see if they actually had a 5 or a 6. But I believe they were a 5 with mesh armor. Yeah, so we got the combat drugs, and basically you're rolling on this table to see what your combat drugs do, which is interesting. So there wasn't, they were random. I don't know if they still are in the Drukari book. But anyway, back then they were, at least. So you were never really sure what kind of enhancement you were going to get from them. Of course, you had to roll a d6, but either way, you still get an enhancement, so that's pretty cool, right? And there you go with the warp beasts, those silly-looking muscular dogs with no skin. Again, people didn't really use the models that often. They tended to use Chaos Hound models or Flesh Hound models or whatever, because those warp beast models just looked absolutely silly, and I'm surprised Games Workshop ever sold any of them, to be perfectly honest with you. And it looks here, they get fleet of foot, they may charge 12 inches, they move through difficult terrain just like infantry. When they're assaulting, they move equal to or double the highest dice roll. That's interesting. If the Beastmaster is slain, the pack is forced to fall back. Making sense. And they will return to the warp and are just removed from play. They don't run away. Okay, cool. And Beastmasters are subject to the witch cult rules, so they're basically witches leading them. Interesting. They use combat drugs just like witches. 12-inch assault move. In order to allow them to keep up with their pack, the Beastmaster is slain. The pack will move towards the nearest unit, friend or foe, assaulting them if they can. So if your Beastmaster gets killed, they run towards the closest thing, whether that be other Dark Eldar or the enemy. It doesn't matter. They don't really care. They're just crazy dogs that just want to kill stuff. Alright, so obviously at this time we've only got 2 choices of troop choices. And actually, now that I look at it, it's actually 1 choice, just warriors. Because your witches are obviously elites. Probably now in the current book, I would imagine that witches are troops. You guys can correct me on that if I'm wrong or right on that. So in this point, it's just warriors. Those are your only troops. They've got a second troop entry here as a raider squad, but all that is a warrior squad that has a raider transport. I mean, duh, right? So yeah, basic Dark Eldar stat line. They all have splinter rifles. You can have 1 shredder or up to 2 shredder or blasters, and up to 2 dark lances or splinter cannons. Wow, that's a pretty heavily armed unit. Yep, and same thing with the other unit. They can only have up to 1 shredder, but that's because the warrior squad is up to 20 and a raider squad is only up to 10, so that makes sense. So you get 1 special and 1 heavy for every 10. Cool. Okay, awesome. That's totally balanced and fair. And obviously a raider can only carry 10 models. Let's see here. Up to 10 Dark Eldar, yep. And the raiders armed with either a Dark Lance or a Disintegrator. Straightforward. That's all there is. Not many options for troops, but again, this is the start, right? Reaver jet bikes, so we basically got Eldar jet bikes that are piloted by witches. So once again, we got the combat drugs, which makes them way better in close combat than your standard like Guardian jet bike. I don't believe they had any other real special rules other than the fact that they were witches with combat drugs and had rich weapons. So of course they have shredders and blasters as opposed to like shuriken catapults and shuriken cannons. Bam bam, there you go. Pretty straightforward there. Hellions, your basic jump troops, so once again, are witches with the combat drugs on flying boards, like hobgoblin boards, which is awesome. I thought these were wicked cool when they came out. I thought they were the coolest thing ever. The newer models now look even better, but back then, again, I was like maybe 13, let's see, 98, so I guess I would have been, yeah, 13 turning 14 that year. I thought these were super cool. I was like, wow, these, like, they're freaking Hobgoblin. Or the Green Goblin, you know what I mean, from Spider-Man. Hilarious. But, yep, they're armed with a Hellglaive. You can have either a Shredder or a Blaster in the unit. And finally into heavy supports. We've only got a couple choices. Again, the Talos, which is basically your, I guess, Wraithlord or Dreadnought. Not like now where they're taken in squadrons. Back then they were only 1 per heavy support choice. But they were actually really tough to take out because as you can see here, they're toughness 7. And I might be wrong, we'll see when we get to 4th edition, but I think in 4th edition they even made them up to toughness 9, if I believe correctly. I think they made the Wraithlord toughness 8 and the Talos toughness 9 in later editions. But still, toughness 7 is really hard to take out in this edition. considering most things are strength 3 or 4. And we are using the old to wound table that we had from 2nd. It's still stuck in this edition and has stuck right through up until 7th, basically. So there it is. We also have a Ravager, which is basically the Raider with the extra heavy weapons with no transport capacity. So it comes with 3 Dark Lances, and you can upgrade them to Disintegrators for 5 points each. Straightforward. And of course Scourges, which are considered a heavy support choice because they all carry heavy weapons, but they do have wings and they do fly. It says here they all come with Splinter Rifles, but up to 4 of them can be upgraded to Splinter Cannons or Dark Lances. Splinter Cannons 20 points, Dark Lances 25 points, fair enough. You can upgrade 1 to the Unit Leader for 6 points, right, the Cerebite. So they're basically Dark Eldar Warriors with wings that carry heavy weapons. Basically your Dark Eldar Devastator squad. More or less. And of course, the summary. They always give you nice summaries in this edition, so you don't have to flip around for characteristics. Every book has a nice little summary at the end of the army list, just to show you all the stat lines, all the vehicle stat lines, as well as all of the weapons, in one nice, concise summary, which made playing a lot easier than having to flip through around your codex, which is great.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam.
And I'm Jay.
We are Encounter Wargaming.
And we wanted to celebrate hitting our 1,500 subscribers with giving some stuff away. What are we giving away, Adam?
Fort Bane! Yeah. Alright, we're calling this the 2,500 subscriber Forge Bane giveaway because that's the target we need to hit to give this puppy away.
That's right. So the first thing you need to do is share this video, the video you are watching right now. And
then click subscribe on YouTube.
if you haven't already.
That's it for 1 entry.
And the more you share it, hopefully, the more people we can get to hit subscribe and hit that 2,500.
Woohoo!
But there are other ways to win as well.
Tell them about it.
Well, you can follow us on Twitch. That will also get you an entry. So you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitch. On top of that,
Support us on Patreon for 5 big buckaroo entries.
crazy. So also all the people that already support us on Patreon, don't worry, you're also 5 entries. But also, you can hit subscribe on Twitch. Subscribing on Twitch will get you another 5 entries into the contest.
So good, and all of this to say thank you guys for all the support. We appreciate it very much. We've come a long way, and it's because of you.
It's true. It's been a wild ride, and thanks for all the support, all the help, and we want to give you some cool stuff as a thank you.
Awesome. So hey, remember to share this video, and guys, I think that's it. So we'll see you at our next encounter.
Alright. And now we get into the couple pages of explanation for all of their war gear, once again. They didn't have a massive bestiary section to explain all the units in this edition. They didn't have a massive armory section. As we saw with the Space Marine book, as well as this book, it's literally just all of your war gear is like explained right here. So you have your war gear list at the front of the army list, obviously, right? And then they just give you these couple of pages just explaining everything and what it does in the actual rules. Like I say, we've done away with all of the war gear cards, all of the extra supplement cards and everything. And with the 2nd edition, it was almost like you were playing a card game on top of your miniature game. In this edition, they really just made it so all you needed was your templates, your dice, and your rule book. Or on your codex, I mean. If somebody had the rulebook handy, that's great. Otherwise, all of the rules are right here in these 2 pages, which makes things stupid easy. Nice and streamlined, nice and straightforward. If I remember correctly, a lot of people actually complained that they oversimplified the game, which is really interesting, considering I was a kid at the time, and I actually really enjoyed the fact that they streamlined the game. Just simply because 2nd edition, although we did play it and we had fun playing it, for 11 and 12-year-olds, it's a very complex rule system to get your head around. Whereas in 3rd, they really streamlined everything and made it very easy for us to play games of Warhammer 40,000 on a Saturday afternoon. So we got some awesome cool artwork here as well. The homunculus letting out some kind of demon out of a box here with all the Dark Eldar warriors protecting them. See a Talos in the background. It's not really clear who they're fighting. I don't really see any enemy on this pic. Nope, just the Eldar. But that's cool. It's cool. It's a wicked cool piece of art. And now we're getting into the color pages. This is always fun because we get to see the models from that era. So this is your basic army. They're showing you here 1 HQ and 2 troops. So we've got an Archon and 2 squads of warriors. That's where you basically start. This is where to begin, right? This is your force org chart, and this is how you start. So if you want to start playing, this is what you want to do. And then we're going to get into all the cool units. So just like the Space Marine book, we just have some little explanations of what these units are and the model line at the time. So once again, looking at back at this now, from what the models we have now, all these models look stupid silly, but at the time, they were a huge step forward from the 2nd edition. As we saw through the 2nd edition books, things were very comical and cartoony, and this is sort of where they started to take Warhammer 40,000 on a little more of a serious path, a little less comical and cartoony. Now, once again, looking at the current models and how awesome the current Dark Eldar models are, these still look silly and cartoony to us, but compared to the 2nd Ed stuff, especially like the orcs and stuff like that, this stuff is way far ahead. But there's the old Talos, which was a ridiculously fragile metal model, as I remember. The original Scourges literally are Dark Eldar warriors, like aesthetically exactly the same, just with these crazy ass demon wings. Super cool. Oh, it actually shows here these are converted and are not actual Scourges available in the shops. Okay, so they were actually Dark Eldar warrior models that somebody added demon wings to. Probably because they hadn't actually released the Scourge models yet at the publication of this book. Again, like we saw in the Space Marine book, a lot of the 2nd Ed models were being used in the book, even though in that edition they came out with new land speeders, new rhinos, new predators, new land raider models. Yet for the book itself, obviously they didn't have them already ready to go before the book was released, so they just showed you the old models, which kind of sucks because you'd think if you're going to redo a whole model line, you really should do it before the book is released, which is the way they do things nowadays. But back then, I guess, they wanted to get these rules out as quick as possible because, like I said, they completely gutted the edition, right? And released sort of like those quick start rules in the rule book for everybody. And they really wanted to give people codices as quickly as they possibly could. Much like now in 8th, when they released all the indexes to kind of just keep you playing. And within the first year, well, I guess we're in the 2nd year of 8th now, they've pretty much gone through and released almost all of the races at this point. Obviously, we're still waiting on the orcs and a few others. But orcs are out this month, so I'm super excited about that. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about 3rd edition Dark Eldar. So just some suggestions on how to expand on top of your basic army of, you know, the one lord with the 2 units of warriors. These are the units you should consider adding to your army. Extra raider units. Of course, the Scourges as a nice mobile heavy support choice. Reaver jet bikes, which were amazingly awesome in this edition, if I remember correctly, because with the combat drugs, you could just walk through units in close combat, which is amazing because, of course, Eldar have always been made of paper and very easy to kill. Giving you some suggestions for some themed armies. I assume different Dark Eldar cults and stuff like that. And I love this. They don't do this anymore. Show actual tabletop tactics on how to deploy and how to move your models. Like here we're getting kind of a pincer action going on. Here is more of a Gorka Morka thing with these guys sitting back and the witches all moving forward to attack from the flank. They don't really do that in the books anymore, and I love that back in this edition they used to do this kind of stuff. Just like in the 2nd Ed codices, they used to give you like example battle reports. It gives the new players an example of tactical decisions that they might want to make before purchasing models, right? How you want to use your models. Now they really preach, like, you know, grab the models that you like the look of. Don't necessarily concentrate on what's the best thing in the game. But back in this edition, they kind of they wanted to make it as easy to get into the game as you possibly could, and so they wanted to show you stuff like this. Flank attacks, like I say. On this page, there are 3 different battle plans to utilize. Viciousness of the Dark Eldar army and their maximum. You should modify them to suit your own collections of squads, obviously. And there you go. Yep, warriors standing back to keep continuous fire. When the enemy approaches close enough, the fast troops held back pounce forward to finish them off. Crazy. See, they just don't do that anymore. And I like that they did that. But we can still see that they still have all the flocked green tables. It's sort of the norm at this point. They have added in some new terrain, and these are the plastic terrain ruin buildings that they give you in the starter set. They've just added them onto templates with dirt and razor wire and stuff like that, showing you, of course, the terrain sets they sell. But again, moving out of the sort of cartoony comic book into the more grimdark, serious terrain features. There's some Cabal color schemes. Cool. Witch cult color schemes. Awesome. The Cabal of the Bloodied Claw, the Venomous Blade, the Poison Fang, the Rending Talon, the Cabal of the All-Seeing Eye, that's kind of neat. The Cabal of the Black Heart. Showing you the transfers here. What the symbols mean, how they represent different cabals, and of course encouraging you to create your own, which again they don't do much of these days. And of course the standard how to paint your Dark Eldar, basically how to paint Space Marines. Very basic painting techniques. Nowadays, thanks to the Warhammer community and good old Duncan there, it's pretty easy to find painting techniques online, whereas back in this time they really just included these 4-step things to get you started, get you going. And again, green flock bases, goblin green bases, crazy. So we haven't quite made it out of that sort of Gulf green terrain quite yet in this edition. But again, this is literally a step out of second. You'll see as the Third Ed books progress, they get much more in depth. The models get much more complex. Again, it becomes more and more grimdark and less cartoon over the time. And I think I'm just going to stop saying that because I feel like I've just repeated that like 6 times already in this video. Using inks, that's a cool one, because they really haven't done that a lot in past codices. In fact, it's telling you to paint the sand green as opposed to flock. Oh, it's giving you 2 options. You paint the base all goblin green and then add green flock, or you glue sand on and just paint the whole thing green. 6 of one, half dozen of the other, really, because nowadays we do brown with like a bone dry brush at the very minimum, and then add static grass, which looks so much better. In fact, I remember when I was a kid going into a Games Workshop, and I had all my bases done in the goblin green, and one guy who worked there went, "You want to know how to make really cool bases, man?" And then he brought me over, and we glued sand onto one of my bases. We put chestnut ink, which I really wish we still had, because it was the greatest ink they ever made. But anyway, chestnut ink to sort of soak into all of the sand and make it dark, and then just a quick dry brush of bleach bone. Boom, done. Glue on patches of green static grass, and that, like, it blew my mind at the time. I was just like, wow, like, that was so easy, and like, that looks amazing, especially compared to the Gulf green, the Gulf green bases. So here we go, some vehicle color schemes. Awesome. Very basic. Pick a color. Paint everything black. Pick an offset color. Boom. That's your army. Right, Chaos Black and Midnight Blue. Chaos Black and Red Gore. Chaos Black and Lich Purple. Chaos Black and Dark Angel Green. Then they're also giving you other options to do, like, special designs, as opposed to just painting the whole front one color. Cool. And the Heavy Metal Showcase. This is where we get to see all the awesome paint jobs of the Heavy Metal team at GW there. Some cool conversions too. Oh, there he is. The guy we saw opening the box, so that's Urin Rackhearth. Okay. Painted by Adrian Walters. Alright, good job, Adrian. And yeah, you can see that they've added the blades here. Now the cool thing about these Dark Eldar warriors is that they came with these blades that like mohawk down the back of their helmet. You could glue the blade on, you could glue the tuft of hair on. All these blades you see on the sides of their helmets, they were all individually glued on, which was very meticulous at the time, especially for a 12-year-old trying to glue this stuff on. But it made your warriors very customizable. And back then, there wasn't a lot of customizability in their plastic kits. Obviously, the Space Marine kit they came out with in this edition was way more advanced than the second ed one, where you literally just attach their hands and put on their backpack. and they were all in the same pose. This is where they started to really come out with multi-part posable plastic kits. And again, having grown through this with them, these kind of kits just blew my mind at the time, because before that in Second Ed it seemed like everything was mono pose. Like all your orcs were in the same pose, all your space marines were in the same pose, which is strange because even in Rogue Trader they had more multi-part kits than they did in Second, which really just kind of like confused me. But obviously the Second Ed kits aesthetically looked much better than the Rogue Trader ones, much less silly. And again, same with Third, they've started to get less silly and more serious, and I can't believe I just said it again. So more cool pictures of minis in battle. It's a pretty sweet Dark Eldar army taking over an Imperial bunker there. We've got them here in the Orc town fighting the Orcs. Neat. Once again, those converted Scourges. They probably, yeah, I guess they hadn't released the actual Scourge models yet. But they eventually did, and then now they've even given them newer Scourge models, which are absolutely spectacular, by the way. Good job on the latest Dark Eldar line, GW. Fighting the old pewter catechins. I still, in so many ways, think the old pewter catechins look so much better than the current plastic catechins. Because they're just so Arnie looking. They look like an army of Arnies. So cool. The current ones have silly facial expressions and some really weird poses, whereas these guys were just all epic looking. If I had the money, I would go back and buy all the discontinued pewter catechin models, because they're just so nice. Timeless, you know? Still look good even by today's standards. Alright, so now we're getting into some actual fluff and background. So again, very small section at the back of the book. They're going to give you a little bit of background before they start getting into the special characters, just like they did in the Space Marine book. So you've got explanations of their weapons, how the Dark Eldar weapons differ from the craft-rolled Eldar weapons. Just very mean looking. Combat dagger. Monomolecular blade, okay. So it's still sort of Eldar technology, but slightly modified from that which the craft-rolled Eldar use. Cool. And like I said, now we get into special characters. We've got Asdrubal Vect, probably the greatest of the Dark Eldar lords. I guess, yep, it says here he's Lord of the Cabal of the Black Heart. Independent character and follows rules for independent characters. He will never join another unit. Huh. Yet here they clearly show him surrounded by incubi, which is very interesting. Can join an army of the Cabal of the Black Heart so long as it is at least 2,000 points strong. This was back in the day when they used to have to have point minimums to use certain characters. Interesting. Because even in 4th, it got to a point where, like, you had to ask your opponent's permission in order to use special characters, because they were just so OP sometimes. Even if they weren't, you still had to ask permission, which was kind of a silly rule, but especially considering now, when people can just bring, like, 5 knights to the table, and it's like, you don't have to ask to bring a super heavy walker onto the table. You just show up and kick someone's ass, which leads to a lot of hurt feelings, but it is the way it is now. Cruella, Archon of the Emasculators. That is so funny. Cruella, I love that. Like Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. And the Emasculators, so it's clearly a group of Cabal of the Flayed Skull. Clearly all females, right? You'll be joined by Cruella. If you decide to take her, it counts as an HQ choice in the army. She must be exactly as described below. Cannot be given any additional equipment, from the Dark Eldar army. She can only be in battle where both players have agreed to use special characters. So I guess I was wrong. Even in this edition, you both have to agree to the use of special characters. Accompanied by a retinue of her finest warriors, Dark Eldar warriors, or incubi as described in the retinue army list. Okay, so she can be given a retinue, much like other characters. That's cool. We've got Lilith Hesperax, obviously a witch character, because she can be included in a witch army. There you go. Witch squads count as troop choices. Oh, okay, so you can turn your witches to troops, but you just have to include Lilith in the army. Okay, instead of elites. Warriors and Raider squads become elites instead of troops. Okay, so you're basically switching the warriors into the elite section and the witches into the troop section. And there was a lot of that in this edition. You'll find that based on what characters you can take changes battlefield roles of a lot of units. They ended up doing that later with Chaos, that if you took a Khorne dude as your lord, your Khorne Berserkers became troop choices as opposed to becoming... And that stuff has kind of stuck through into future editions after this. Here we go. Drazar, Master of Blades, that would be your Incubi character. Buran Rakarth, there you go, the Master of the Homunculus. And Decapacitator, don't remember that one. Mandrake Champion. Let's take a good look at this guy for a second. Any Dark Eldar may be joined by the Decapacitator. If you take him, he counts as an HQ choice. Must be used exactly as described below. He's got gruesome talismans, a severed head, counts as a trophy rack, okay. And additional limbs. Additional limbs, 2 additional arms have been grafted in the Decapacitator's body, at +2 attacks to his characteristic, +1 to his weapon skill. Okay, so they've already included in brackets 2, bracket 4, 5, bracket 6. They used to do that a lot in this edition. And he's a Master Infiltrator. Apply him using the normal rules, even if scenarios don't normally allow infiltration. Okay, cool. He infiltrates no matter what the scenario. This must be outside both sides deployment zones. You may reveal his location at any time by simply showing your opponent the Decapacitator's head and set up instructions. You must, however, reveal this location on your 3rd turn if you have not done so already. Okay, so he's got to come out by the 3rd turn. Don't wait until the end of the game and just being like, hey, I appear and I take an objective, I win. None of that shenanigans. And, just like we got in the Space Marine book, a Dark Eldar specific scenario, which is super cool, called Slave Raid. Neat. Slave Raid uses the reserves, infiltration, victory points, and random game length, much like most other scenarios. So it looks like we've got the defenders sitting up in the middle, and the Dark Eldar are basically coming in from the edges. Actually, it looks like they're only coming in from this one doorway on this side, so I guess they've opened a web gate, or a webway gate, and they're just coming out to try and take some slaves. The victory conditions. The Dark Eldar win if they score more victory points than the defender, and they have captured at least 1 prisoner. The defender wins if he has more victory points, obviously. Any other result is a draw. Defenders receive 50 victory points for each Dark Eldar unit, apart from Mandrake, still on the table at the end of the mission. This represents the defender preventing Dark Eldar units from leaving with any prisoners. Okay. So I assume they have to get on the table, take prisoners, and leave. If you prevent them from leaving, they don't get the points for taking prisoners. Neat. It's just cool that they do that in this edition, that they have scenarios based on the race that's playing. I think that's wicked cool. Obviously all the scenarios we deal with nowadays are very generalized and for everybody. It would be cool to start seeing them start to put scenarios specific to specific armies in the codexes. That would be something really cool, but obviously they haven't done that yet in this 8th edition, and I don't think we'll be seeing that, but personally I think that would be wicked cool. And last but not least, of course, we've got some explanation of areas of space that they inhabit, different encounters the Imperium have had with the Dark Eldar at different dates, and some nice fluff just to cap off the book. Couple of stories. Again, they just give you sort of 1-page stories. There's no like giant section of fluff in this book anymore. Just some stuff at the end to cap it off. And if you weren't looking for fluff and you just wanted rules, then I guess you don't have to read to the end. And here we go with the Dark Eldar facing off against some sisters. And even here we see them facing off against the Eldar, which is cool, because back in this edition there wasn't allies. They had done away with that at this point. In 2nd Ed, of course, you could have allies, but the Dark Eldar didn't exist, so they couldn't ally with Eldar. Eldar allied with the Imperium, which was really strange. But later in 6, when they reintroduced the ally rules, we saw that the Dark Eldar and the Eldar are actually not enemies per se. They do work together because they are both part of the same dying race, though their methods and motivations are very drastically different. So yeah, it is what it is. And once again, we're seeing all of the plastic trees. These are the ones that came in the 3rd Ed starter set. Those trees did not exist before that, and obviously they're demonstrating them there to to just show you their best use. If you have a lot of them, you can build like a nice little jungle forest with the old Second Ed, you know, foam core buildings. It's cool. They're still making use of the terrain they've always used, and it's cool that we got this cool like traders and trench sort of terrain here, because we didn't really see anything that complicated in Second Ed. They're really starting to evolve the game, especially the tables, where they're getting away from this golf green. They're still doing it, obviously, because again, they haven't updated everything. Obviously, their studio is working with what it has, but here we've got much more complicated terrain that is not just golf green. That's actually really cool looking trenches. That gives me ideas. There's always terrain to build, eh, guys? And you know me, I love terrain. So there it is, Codex Dark Eldar for the 3rd edition of Warhammer 40,000. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I had fun looking back at this book. Like I say, this was the first incarnation of the Dark Eldar, and as you can see, it was a pretty cool one. This was really the introduction of this race into the game, and it falls in line with the, well, I guess all we've seen so far other than this one is the Space Marine book, but as you can see, it falls in line with it. It is a complete change from that of 2nd edition. As you saw in our past videos, this all the 2nd edition stuff. If you haven't, go back and watch that stuff because it's worth looking at, and leads right up into this stuff. So we're continuing our look at 3rd edition next time with the Codex Assassins, and like I'm saying, how these books are like basically pamphlets. This one's even skinnier than some of the others, so because it's basically just Assassins. So this is where we're going to get into the supplement books. So now we've got our Space Marine book. This is like literally an add-on book for other Imperial armies. Hence why it's so skinny, because literally it's just the Assassins. So that is what it is. Look out for that in the near future. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button, guys, because it'll let you know when our videos come out, especially if you hit that little bell notification next to it. It will literally notify you every time one of these videos come out. But not just these videos, we do terrain tutorials, we do battle reports, we do hobby tutorials, we have a podcast. We do it all, guys, and it will all be shown here on this channel. So I hope you guys enjoy looking at the old stuff, because I love going through the old stuff, and I've gotten a lot of good comments and feedback from you guys. I'm going to keep doing these Relics of the Dark Age videos, because especially for all you old hammerheads out there that really like seeing the old school stuff, it brings it, again, it's nice nostalgia. It makes us all warm and fuzzy inside, bring us back to our childhood and all of that goodness. So also, if you want to help support us and keep things going the way they're going, or even improve things here at Encounter Wargaming, please go to the description below and check out our Patreon. So I won't get into too much detail about our Patreon, but I will tell you that for as little as $1 a month, it will greatly increase your Encounter Wargaming experience, and it can help us improve our equipment, as well as, like I say, our gaming tables, our miniatures, all of that kind of stuff, and it just keeps the ball rolling, you know what I mean? So it's a win-win for everybody, right? For you, it costs next to nothing, and for us, it helps us do everything. So please go to the description below, hit that link, and at least read through the page, because it is to your benefit and to our benefit. And other than that, just thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy these Relics videos, and like I say, I'll continue to pump them out, because obviously you guys are loving them, and I'm loving doing them. So we'll see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on his way back home. Okay.